You'd think there'd be rules about what you can and can't say during a graduation speech. Apparently, there aren't. I was sitting in the fifth row, clutching a small bouquet of white peonies. They were her favorite, my daughter Emily's. I picked them myself that morning, trimmed the stems, wrapped them with a blue ribbon to match her sash. She was the first in our family to go to college, the first to graduate summa cum laude. I didn't think I'd cry until she walked the stage. But it wasn't the tears I expected. My husband, Jack, was asked to say a few words. Not because he was special, he wasn't the dean or the guest speaker. He had simply donated to the Alumni Fund a few months earlier and managed to slide his name onto the parent remarks segment of the program. I thought he would say something short, proud, predictable. Instead, he walked up to the podium, cleared his throat, and smiled. At first, it was charming. He opened with a joke about how fast time flies, how just yesterday Emily was building Lego castles and now she was headed to law school. People chuckled, even I smiled. Then his voice shifted. But you know, he said, pausing, like he was getting emotional, sometimes, these milestones, they wake us up. They make us realize things we've kept quiet, things we've buried just to keep things nice. I blinked. What I've been living a life that no longer feels honest. He continued. Not to myself, and not to Lauren. He said my name, into the microphone. People started glancing around. One woman gasped softly behind me. Jack went on, voice unwavering. We spend so much of our lives keeping up appearances, showing up to things, smiling in pictures, playing house. But I believe today is about new beginnings. And so, Lauren, I just wanted you to hear it clearly. I'm done pretending. He paused, glanced down at a folded piece of paper, then back up. I moved out this morning. The papers are filed. I'm leaving you. Someone actually dropped a water bottle behind me. The sound made Emily flinch on stage. And me, I just sat there, staring. The flowers in my lap now shaking in my hands. My ears rang. My vision blurred. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Jack stepped back from the podium like he'd just said something brave, like he'd unburdened himself. Some people clapped confused. Maybe out of reflex, Emily didn't move. She looked frozen at the edge of the stage, her tassel fluttering slightly in the breeze. Her smile was gone. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for me. She found me, and I saw her lips part, just slightly, as if to ask why I stood. Slowly, quietly, people turned. A few stared with pity, a few with open mouths. Jack didn't look at me. Not once. He turned toward the exit aisle behind the stage, where a woman blonde, long-legged, maybe mid-30s, waited with a purse slung over her shoulder and a face that said, finally. That was the moment I felt it, not heartbreak, not even rage. It was something colder, sharper, a hum in my chest like a wire pulling tight. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I walked past the families, the cameras, the decorations, the string quartet tuning up for the reception. And all I could think was, why did he need an audience for this? Why did he need to crush me in front of my daughter? The answer, I'd find out later. But that morning, all I could do was walk away, holding crushed peonies, with applause still ringing in my ears for him. Jack used to make me laugh so hard I'd choke on my coffee. We met at a tiny music festival outside Santa Fe. I was 23, just out of grad school, wearing boots a size too big and pretending I knew how to camp. He had a crooked smile, a beaten-up guitar, and a way of talking like everything in the world could be figured out if you just breathe slower. We got married the following fall. I wore my sister's dress. We danced in my aunt's backyard under strings of borrowed lights. And we swore like every young couple does that it was us against the world. That we'd always talk it out, laugh it off, fight fair. For a while, we did. Jack wasn't perfect, but he was charming. He knew how to win people over. My parents adored him. My friends said we were balanced. I was the practical one, the planner. He was spontaneous, soulful, the dreamer. We weren't rich, but we were in love. Or at least, I thought we were. When Emily came along, everything shifted, but not in the way I expected. I stayed home with her, not because Jack asked me to, but because he said, "She needs someone grounded, and you're so good at that." So I paused my career. Not ended, just paused. At least, that's what I told myself. That it was temporary. That Jack's freelance projects would take off. And soon, I could go back to work, finish my teaching certificate, and maybe even start that book on developmental psychology I'd been sketching in journals. But years passed. His projects became gigs, then excuses. His days were filled with half-finished ideas, and mine were filled with laundry and lukewarm coffee. Still, I held on, because Emily adored him, and because when Jack was on, he could light up a room. He'd sing to her at bedtime, draw stars on the ceiling with a flashlight. He'd make pancakes in shapes that somehow resembled bunnies or giraffes. And yet, something started to turn. I noticed it in the little things first. The way he stopped sitting at the table during dinner, how he started using headphones all the time even when no music played, the way he looked at his phone, smiled, then quickly turned it over when I entered the room. He'd come home from strategy sessions smelling faintly of perfume, not mine. But I didn't ask. Not then. Instead, I reminded myself of the good days, the camping trips, Emily's first birthday when he made a rocket ship cake from scratch, the night he stayed up with her through a fever while I cried in the hallway. I told myself marriages go through phases, that maybe I'd just been tired, that maybe he was tired, that all we needed was a weekend away, or a new routine, or better lighting in the bedroom. But Jack kept pulling back. He started teasing me in public, but not the sweet kind, the cutting kind, at dinner with friends. He once laughed and said, "Lauren used to be fun, didn't she?" Everyone chuckled. I smiled too tight, thin-lipped but inside. Something cracked. He called me intense, said I worried too much, said I planned everything within an inch of its life. One night, when I asked if he still loved me, he said, "Love God. Lauren, I don't even know what that means anymore." And then he rolled over. Still, I stayed. For Emily, who had just turned 15, who needed both parents, who looked so much like him when she laughed that sometimes it ached. I stayed because I believed he'd come back, that the man who once sang Leonard Cohen in our tiny kitchen still lived somewhere inside the stranger I now shared a bed with. And because Emily still asked, "When's Dad getting home?" in a voice that sounded too hopeful for me to answer honestly. So I smiled. I kept routines. I made lunches. I kept my mouth shut, even when he started disappearing for entire weekends, even when he came home with stories that didn't line up, even when, one night, I opened his laptop to check a hotel confirmation for a supposed conference, and found nothing booked. I closed the screen without saying a word. Maybe that was the moment it began when silence became my shield. Maybe I believed if I just held on a little longer, things would right themselves, that all of this was just fog, and that if I stood still long enough, it would lift. But fog that thick, it doesn't lift. It drowns. And looking back now, I wonder, was I in love with Jack, or was I in love with who he used to be? That version of him, the one who held our baby girl like she was made of glass. He disappeared long before the speech at her graduation. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Not to Emily, not to myself. Because saying it out loud would mean accepting that everything I'd given up had been for a man who was already halfway gone. And I wasn't ready for that truth. Not yet. The silence after the graduation was louder than anything Jack had said into that microphone. I didn't speak on the car ride home. Emily didn't either. She sat beside me in the back seat of her friend's car, her hand lightly resting on my wrist, like she was checking if I was still breathing. I was, but just barely. That night, I stood in our kitchen, still in my wrinkled dress, my hand gripping a chipped mug of untouched tea. Jack hadn't come home, of course. I didn't expect him to. Not after announcing to a crowd of parents and strangers that he was done with me. But what I didn't know was that he'd been done with me long before that speech. The next morning, while Emily slept, I walked into his office, not with fury, with numb curiosity. I'd never gone through his things before, not because I believed in boundaries, but because I genuinely hadn't wanted to know. I thought maybe he had his reasons. Maybe he'd tell me. Instead, I opened a drawer and found the first breadcrumb, a pink business card, lipstick smudged, tucked under a stack of invoices. Her name was on it, no title, just a first name and a private number written in curling, self-assured script. I didn't call. I didn't cry either. Instead, I opened his email. I wasn't even trying to snoop. I just wanted to check if he'd canceled the utilities, since according to him he'd moved out this morning. But the email tab was still open, and so was the folder. He'd labeled it poetry. I nearly laughed. Inside, dozens of emails. Not poetry, unless you count cheap metaphors for late-night affairs. Attachments, hotel confirmations, and one photo blurry but unmistakable of Jack and the woman from behind the stage. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't recognize him, but because he looked happy, freer, looser, like a man who had already grieved something long before burying it. And the timestamps, they went back over a year. That entire time he had been picking fights, sleeping late, coming home cold. He'd been building another life, quietly, patiently, lovingly, not with me. Later that day, Emily walked into the kitchen and asked, voice trembling, "Do you want me to talk to him?" I shook my head. She sat down across from me, elbows on the counter. He's been different for a while. I thought maybe it was work. I nodded. She hesitated, then said, "Last fall, I saw him with someone, outside campus. I thought maybe it was a client." Her eyes welled with guilt. I reached across and held her hand. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "It's not yours either." It should have broken me, that moment. But instead, something in me clicked. That night, I went into the closet, pulled out the box I hadn't touched in years labeled taxes. Inside, buried under folders and dusty statements, were copies of our joint accounts, property documents, retirement files. I opened them one by one, highlighted lines, took notes. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to start remembering what I'd forgotten, what I had given up, and what still bore my name. A few days later, a bank envelope arrived addressed to Jack. It was opened, probably by mistake. Inside was a confirmation of a new account, his name only. I didn't say a word. The next evening, I waited until the house was quiet, then backed up every file from his office computer. Not to sabotage, just to know. Every password, every email, every schedule, every transfer. I found calendar entries marked meditation that were actually hotel reservations. I found one email to his lawyer, dated 2 months before the graduation, in which he outlined his exit plan. Exit plan. That's what he called it. Not a separation, not a conversation, not a divorce, an exit, like I was a building on fire, and he was slipping out the side door to save himself. I remember reading that line, blinking once, then closing the laptop. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a single line in my notebook. He wants an exit. I'll give him a door. but not the one he's expecting, and that's when the shift began. I stopped hoping he'd come back. I stopped grieving the man I thought I married. I stopped wondering what I did wrong. Instead, I watched. I listened. I planned. Because when someone makes a show of your humiliation, when they stand on a stage and say, "I'm done," they think you'll collapse. But sometimes you stand up slower. You look around, and you start taking notes. I never said a word to Jack about what I'd found, but I remembered every name, every email, every lie. And in silence, without a single outburst, I began writing the next act. It started with a chair, not thrown, not shattered, not tipped over in a dramatic scene, just moved. I dragged it into the middle of our living room, Jack's old leather armchair, the one he always claimed as his spot. Then I sat in it, pulled out my laptop, and got to work. For weeks, I'd said nothing, played the role of the grieving wife, the quiet one, the one who'd been humiliated publicly but chose not to retaliate. That's what Jack counted on, a woman too stunned to move. But I wasn't stunned anymore. I was calculating. Emily noticed the shift first. One evening, she found me at the kitchen table, printing stacks of documents, bank records, emails, title transfers. She walked in, saw the determination in my face, and didn't say a word. She just poured me a cup of tea and set it beside me like she knew what I was doing mattered. And it did. Because Jack hadn't just cheated. He'd constructed an escape route that siphoned our money into accounts I never had access to. He had forged my name on a few joint agreements, moved assets quietly, and lied so many lies it made my skin hum with disbelief. But I hadn't lived in silence for 2 decades to come out empty-handed. So I hired a lawyer, not a flashy one, not the type you see on late-night TV ads, a quiet woman named Diane, who had steel in her spine and a Rolodex full of forensic accountants. She read through everything I brought her, asked only one question: "Do you want scorched earth or a strategic retreat?" I didn't even hesitate. "Strategic," I said, "but I want him to feel it." Diane smiled. "Then we'll make it public. Controlled. But public." The graduation had been his stage. I was about to build mine. We waited. We gathered. We watched. Jack thought he'd won because I didn't fight back. He moved in with her, the blonde from the ceremony, and started parading her around like a new accessory. And he kept smiling until the gala. It was Emily's idea, actually. She had been selected for a Young Scholars Award, and the university invited all families to attend a donor reception, a black tie event held in the glass atrium of the Alumni Hall. I nearly declined. But Emily touched my hand and said, "Come. You deserve to be seen for once." I wore navy, clean lines, soft satin. Nothing too bold, but enough to feel like armor. Jack arrived with her, of course. Her dress was tighter than anything I'd seen in years, and she clung to his arm like a trophy glued in place. He noticed me, gave a small nod, almost smug. He still thought I was alone, until Emily stepped up to the microphone. The MC introduced her summa cum laude graduate, early acceptance to Columbia Law, and recipient of the Founders Fellowship. Applause, flashbulbs. Then Emily said, "Before I begin, I just want to thank 2 people. One of them isn't in this room, but the other is my mother." The spotlight hit me. I froze. She continued. She raised me, protected me, and unlike others, never used a stage to humiliate someone she once loved. A few people stiffened, the room quieted. Jack looked like someone had slapped him with a velvet glove, subtle, elegant, brutal. And then it was my turn. Because the university's board chair, a woman who just so happened to be Diane's former client, asked if I'd like to say a few words. Jack's donation had once gotten him on stage, Mine had earned me the final word. I stepped up slowly, calmly. I looked at the rows of faces, parents, alumni, trustees. And then I said 3 months ago. I was sitting in this university's stadium when my husband made a public announcement one meant to shame, to humiliate, and to strip me of dignity. But what he didn't know was, I'd already discovered everything. Gasps. I knew about the second accounts, the private withdrawals, the forged signatures. I paused, locking eyes with Jack. I stayed quiet not because I was broken, but because I was building. And tonight, I'm proud to announce that my legal team has submitted evidence of financial misconduct, marital fraud, and falsified documentation to both our divorce court and the State Ethics Committee. Jack shot to his feet. You vindictive security stepped forward. The board chair raised a hand. Calmly, I continued. I also want to clarify that while my name was left off certain documents, I have since re-established ownership over the property he attempted to conceal, including our family home. He screamed, loud enough to cut through the chamber, "You can't do this. You can't take it all." I looked at him, heart hammering, not with fear but relief. You already did. I'm just taking it back. The woman beside him, his new flame, quietly stepped away, her face blanching. And Emily. She didn't cry. She smiled. Just a little. And I knew. I had won something bigger than property or pride. I had protected my daughter's memory of me. I had reclaimed the space I was never meant to beg for. I didn't stay for dessert. I walked out into the cool night air with Emily beside me, her hand in mine. She looked up at me and said, "That was the most graceful takedown I've ever seen." I smiled. Funny. I wasn't trying to take him down. What were you doing then? I looked forward toward the car. The road. The horizon that no longer had his name etched into it. Taking myself back. That night wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And Jack, so used to wielding the spotlight, finally learned what it felt like to be exposed in it. People like Jack don't fall quietly. They flail. They drag things down with them. They scream, twist the story, reach for any thread of dignity still within grasp. And Jack flailed loud. The night after the gala, my lawyer forwarded me 3 emails Jack had sent to her, to the university's legal liaison, and to my former neighbor, who also happened to be his golf buddy. In each one, he sounded like a man drowning in his own reflection, calling me vindictive, unstable. She ambushed me, he wrote. She made a spectacle. But here's the thing people had seen, and when the curtain drops, nothing protects a man more than silence. I had removed mine. The fallout came fast. The Ethics Committee launched a formal review of Jack's financial conduct with the Alumni Board, apparently. Some of his donations had strings attached. His name, once printed proudly on glossy newsletters, vanished within weeks. They pulled his speaking slot from an upcoming campus event and declined to renew his donor privileges pending resolution of legal inquiries. That was the first crack. Then came the real blow. Jack's job, his prized executive position at the real estate firm he co-founded, came with clauses. Morality clauses. Clauses about reputation, fraud, personal litigation. Diane had known that, of course. She'd timed everything around it. When my court petition became public record with documents outlining his asset concealment and forgery, the firm had no choice. They asked for his resignation within 48 hours. He tried to fight it, claimed domestic dispute and emotional revenge. But the board wasn't stupid. They saw what the press saw, a man who humiliated his wife on stage, only to be exposed weeks later for financial deceit. They paid him out, but cut ties. And just like that, Jack lost the thing he clung to even tighter than our marriage image. As for the other woman, the one he left me for, she didn't last. Not a dramatic breakup, not some big betrayal, just disappearance. One day, she stopped attending events, blocked him on social media, deleted the shared photos. A friend of a friend mentioned that she had been looking for stability, and realized too late that Jack wasn't it. But my favorite moment, the one I keep tucked in the corner of my memory like a keepsake, came at a coffee shop near campus. I was sitting alone, reading. Emily had just started orientation for Columbia, and I decided to take the morning for myself. Jack walked in. He didn't notice me at first. He looked thinner, more tired. His suit wasn't pressed. The edges of him, once so carefully curated, had dulled. Then he saw me. I didn't look away. He approached, hesitating, like a man unsure if he still had the right. "Lauren," he said, "do you have a second?" I nodded. "Why not?" He sat across from me. No charm, no swagger, just silence, thick and heavy. After a minute, he said, "You really did it." I raised an eyebrow, did what destroyed me. I stirred my tea, calm, gentle. "No, Jack, you did that. I just made sure you couldn't hide it anymore." His eyes glistened, but not with apology, with disbelief. Like he still couldn't fathom that I, of all people, was the one who ended up with power. "Are you happy now?" he asked. I paused, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "I'm at peace. That's better." He left without finishing his coffee, and that was the last time we spoke. In the months that followed, the legal proceedings finalized. The judge granted me full ownership of our home, plus back spousal support and a share of the assets he attempted to hide. He appealed. He lost. The court ruled that his intentional concealment of funds constituted bad faith, and he was ordered to pay attorney's fees on top of the original settlement. Emily stayed with me that summer. She helped repaint the dining room, donated old furniture, filled the house with music again. One night, as we folded laundry, she asked, "Do you think he ever loved you?" I folded a towel, took a breath. I think he loved how I loved him, and he mistook that for being invincible. Emily nodded, thoughtful. Then she said the words I didn't know I'd been waiting for. "I'm proud of you. Mom, you showed him what strength looks like, and I did. Not with shouting, not with vengeance, but with truth, with boundaries, with the quiet resilience of someone who refuses to be erased. And now, when I walk into a room, I no longer wonder if I'll be humiliated, forgotten, or overlooked. I walk in knowing exactly who I am, because justice isn't always a courtroom drama. Sometimes, it's just walking away whole, while the one who betrayed you sits in the ruins they built themselves. The house is quieter now. Not empty, just peaceful. It's funny how stillness used to scare me. After Jack left, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to silence so thick it felt like grief had a shape. But now, I light a candle in the kitchen, sip my coffee slow, and listen to the wind nudge the curtains. It feels like my own rhythm, not borrowed, not conditional. The mornings belong to me again. Emily visits often. She brings fresh fruit from the Saturday market and always insists on cooking dinner, even though she burns garlic more often than not. The other day, she found my old camera and asked if I wanted to start taking photos again. I hadn't picked it up in years. She handed it to me like it was sacred. "Mom, maybe it's time," she whispered. "Time to frame your life how you see it, not how someone else did." And just like that, I started again. I walked to the lake near our house, capturing reflections, not just in the water, but in myself. I take photos of things I'd forgotten. I loved peeling paint on the old boathouse, a pair of ducks chasing light, a woman reading alone under a willow tree. I see pieces of myself in all of it, quietly enduring, quietly blooming. Jack never apologized. Not really. He sent a stiff letter through his lawyer months later, something about regret and miscommunication. He asked if I would consider speaking amicably about the remaining insurance policies. I never responded, because some chapters don't deserve an encore. Some men don't deserve closure wrapped in kindness. And yet, I'm not bitter, just clear. I think there's a moment every woman reaches when she realizes the apology she's been waiting for might never come, and it stops mattering. Not because she's forgiven the betrayal, but because she no longer seeks validation from the hands that tried to break her. I healed outside his orbit. And I know many of you watching, listening, reading this. You might be somewhere in that dark middle, the space between heartbreak and hope, between grief and growth, between silence and screaming. You might be sitting in a house too quiet, holding coffee that's gone cold, wondering who you are without the title someone else gave you: wife, partner, the loyal one. Let me tell you this. You are more than the role you played in someone else's story. You are not broken. You are rebuilding. And that is sacred work. The day Emily moved into her dorm, she hugged me tighter than she ever had. Then she stepped back, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Mom, you didn't just survive. You showed me what it means to rise." I carry those words like armor, like light. Because I didn't get revenge. I got freedom. And in a world that tells women to stay quiet, to stay small, to endure for the sake of harmony, I chose myself. Not with rage, not with cruelty, but with truth, with patience, with quiet, deliberate dignity. And you can, too. Maybe your pain doesn't look like mine. Maybe the betrayal wore a different face. But if you've ever felt erased, discarded, replaced, I see you, I believe you. And I promise you this isn't the end of your story. You are not what they threw away. You are what remains, what rebuilds, what blooms. So take the walk, open the window, play your music loud, cook what you like, paint the wall red, block the number, unfollow the ghost, write the letter you never send, cry on a Tuesday, laugh on a Thursday, kiss your own forehead goodnight. Because healing isn't loud. It's not always brave or poetic. Sometimes it's just the simple act of waking up and deciding today, I choose me. And if this story spoke to something deep in you, if you've lived a version of this quietly, painfully, please know you're not alone. I'd love to hear your story below. Someone else might need to read it. And if you know a woman who's still waiting to remember her worth, send this to her. Let her see what rising looks like. And if you'd like more stories like this, stories that remind you strength is soft and healing is real, feel free to subscribe. We're not just surviving here. We're starting over, and that is a beautiful thing.